Coffee. For many people, it's the lifeblood they need to go and get through the day. It's filled with caffeine, has a variety of tastes, can be made very easily, and will usually keep you going throughout your day job or night job, depending on what you do and how much you have. But for those who prefer a more unique take on coffee, they might want to go and try cold brew coffee, as it's something that has its own unique feel, if you will. But how can you try it if you've never tasted it before? Well, allow us to show you the way to cold brew coffee. So number 4, cold brew coffee. You may have noticed that cold brew coffee usually costs more than iced coffee at your local cafe. That may be because it's more time consuming to make or because it's considered a superior brew method. So why do cold brew lovers think it's superior to regular coffee? Well, we'll start by talking about that. So is cold brew just another type of iced coffee? It may seem that way because it's often served with ice, but cold brew has a different brew method and chemical profile than iced coffee. Cold brew coffee is brewed or steeped with cold or room temperature water, and it has a much longer brew time. It often has a different flavor or chemical profile because some of the acids and oils, the compounds that can add bitterness in coffee, are not soluble in cold water, but the sweeter compounds are. That means that cold brew can have a sweeter flavor and can be easier on sensitive stomachs. It can also be a good option for people trying to cut down on sugar because it may not require as much sugar as iced coffee. Now, iced coffee is brewed with hot water, which is then cooled by adding ice. The coffee used for iced coffee could have been brewed in a number of ways: a drip machine, French press, AeroPress, and it may have a slightly bitter flavor depending on how long the brewing process took. It may also develop a bitter flavor if it's allowed to cool at room temperature before adding the ice. So that's why many of us like to add more sugar and cream or milk to iced coffee. So that's just a quick breakdown of some of the differences, and we'll get into more of the specifics as we go on. So number 3, what really makes cold brew coffee special? Well, there's a lot of buzz about cold brew, and with good reason. It's delicious in the eyes of most people, but what's different about it? Well, the cold brew steeping process does produce a more concentrated coffee than regular hot brew because you use a higher ratio of coffee grounds to water. But it is less acidic thanks to the cold water steeping, and because it is usually diluted 50-50 with water, it results in a smoother, more gentle coffee. So with that being said, if you just drink cold brew as is without diluting, it would be stronger than a regular cup of coffee. But hot brewed coffee is more often referred to as strong coffee. Now, to be clear, caffeine is not something that is strong in cold brew, though obviously you could make it that way if you wanted. Caffeine is one of the compounds in coffee that's more soluble in hot water, so while cold brew does produce a concentrated form of coffee, it's brewed by steeping ground coffee in cold water. And when it's served, cold brew is usually diluted with water and milk or cream. As a result, a cup of cold brew coffee usually contains less caffeine than a regular cup of hot brewed coffee. If you do not dilute the cold brew when you drink it, then it would have more caffeine than the same amount of hot brewed regular coffee because it is a concentrate. Cold brew concentrate is the concentrated coffee produced when you steep a higher than normal ratio, usually a 1-to-4 ratio, of ground coffee to water in cold water for 12 to 24 hours. The cold brew concentrate is usually diluted 50-50 with water, often some milk and cream too, before being served. Number 2, benefits of cold brew coffee. So why do people choose cold brew over regular coffee or iced coffee? There could be a number of reasons. First of all, flavor. Cold brew coffee has a different chemical profile than regular coffee. Some of the compounds that can produce a bitter flavor when coffee is brewed with hot water are less soluble in cold water, so cold brew is less likely to taste bitter. But the compounds that can give coffee a sweet flavor note remain soluble in the cold water, which means people who like sweeter flavors in their coffee are usually cold brew coffee fans. Also, less acid. Cold brew is less acidic than regular coffee, so many people with sensitive stomachs find it less upsetting. A cold brew can contain up to 60 to 70% less acid than regular coffee, unless the cold brew concentrate has not been diluted. And sweeter. Yeah, it has a sweeter flavor, so people trying to cut down on sugar may find it a better option than regular coffee. because they may not need to add as much sugar, or maybe even none at all, and less caffeine. Cold brew is usually diluted 1-to-1 with water, milk, or cream when served, so it has less caffeine than regular coffee. Now, this could make a difference for people that are sensitive to caffeine, but it still has a nice amount, so it's not like a decaf option. It just contains less than regular coffee. Bean practicality. Cold brew can be a way to still get the good out of older coffee beans. Because it has a long steep time, the flavors left in the beans will be extracted differently than with a regular hot brew process. You may get more flavor out of them. And if you like the flavor of a light roast but find it more acidic than a darker roast, cold brew may be your answer to using up those light roast beans. Light roasts often produce fruity or citrus flavor notes, and I love that in a cold brew. It's already cold. Now that might sound funny, but when you're making iced coffee, it's ideal to start out with cold brew because it's already cold, which means your ice will last longer. You also won't have to worry about the bitter flavors that sometimes come from making iced coffee from hot brewed coffee. And you don't have to brew it daily. Once the 12 to 24 hour steeping process is over, you can store your cold brew coffee in the fridge for up to 2 weeks, as long as it's sealed properly. It maintains its flavor much better than storing hot brewed coffee because it's a concentrate, and that means your morning coffee routine just got a lot quicker. So add to that, many who drink it will swear it's easier on their systems, something that a lot of people would want because of their sometimes questionable stomach. Number 1. Making cold brew coffee. Although cold brew coffee is often more expensive than regular coffee when you order it at a cafe or restaurant, it's not hard to make. So learning how to make cold brew coffee at home is pretty easy. The biggest consideration here is time. You'll need to plan ahead at least 12 to 24 hours to make a true cold brew. Want more good news? You don't even need special equipment to make your cold brew. You've probably already got what you need. And if not, you won't need to spend very much to get the setup, probably less than $10. When it comes to making cold brew, it helps to remember that while you can drink it cold, you don't have to. There are all sorts of ratios of coffee to water that is used in cold brew, but most say a ratio of around 1-to-4 or 1-to-5 works best. For example, 1 cup of coffee grounds to 4 cups of water. Now once you have your concentrate, you want to brew it, but how long do you let it brew? On the counter? Now, according to experts over at Stumptown Coffee Roasters, if you're steeping at room temperature, it might be best to go with between 14 to 18 hours. If you leave it steeping longer, it could take on some unpleasant flavor notes. Now, when you're done, it's best to put it in the fridge as soon as possible. In the fridge. If you're steeping it in the fridge, you can leave it a little longer, around 20 or even 24 hours. Once you have it all done in terms of waiting, you need to filter it, and there are multiple ways of doing that. And then after that, you can go and enjoy your coffee. The best part is that you can go and use various items to try and make the coffee happen, including a mason jar, a toddy system, or a French press. Either way, once you're done, you'll be able to enjoy cold brew coffee. Enjoy! So what do you think of this look at cold brew coffee and how it can be made? Did you realize that people have put this much thought into coffee before? Have you ever personally tried cold brew coffee? And if so, what'd you think about it? Will you be trying it out now that you've seen these recipes? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time right here on the channel.